Freedom, in its many meanings, has been an ungraspable objective for African Americans within the United States since the first slaves were brought here in 1619. Yet, that has not stopped African Americans from fighting, protesting, and demanding for it throughout the nation, and especially in southern states such as Alabama. These stories of the struggle for freedom have typically been told about Birmingham, Selma, and Montgomery from the perspective of well-known civil rights leaders such as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, John Lewis, and Rosa Parks. Yet, these accounts only tell part of the story. Residents from 5 counties in west central Alabama, Greene, Hale, Marengo, Perry, and Tuscaloosa counties, were instrumental in helping to push the movement forward. These residents consisted of thousands of unsung heroes, the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement.
We always, we walked up to the Diamond Theater all the time, knowing that we couldn't go over to the Bama Theater.
Everything still was segregated. The state fair, we had a certain day to go to the state fair. Black people could go on certain days, white people go on other days. Downtown, you had the white restroom, black restroom, white water fountain, black water fountain.
I had 3 meals a day. My parents, they weren't rich, but my daddy was an entrepreneur. He fixed cars. He was an auto mechanic. He had his own business.
If you were working and protesting and they found out you were leading all these groups, they're going to terminate you. They're going to terminate your family or do whatever. So the ministers were basically self-employed. So they had free will. They could do basically what they want to do. The principals, some of them participated secretly, and then others were afraid of losing their position. And I remember on one event we were demonstrating, we were getting ready to march, and the principal of the high school, Druid High School, who was a member of this church, locked all the doors at the school to keep the people from protesting. And let's keep in mind that most of the protesters were young people. I was 14 years old. So most of the people were, I would say, from 12 up to their mid-20s. Those were basically the protesters. And a lot of them came out of high school. So what the principal did on this particular day is locked up. He locked all the doors where we could not get out of school. So what we did, all of a sudden, everybody had to go to the bathroom at the same time. So we jumped out the bathroom windows, and we ended up right here, and we continued to protest.
There was a common goal, and it was more of togetherness. We're in this together. When we were coming up, my father was nothing for them to bring other people into our household and live with us or stay in our house half the night or for a week or so. We talk about the barber shops, the drugstore, Miss Linton, the ministers in the church, the insurance people, the garage owner, the mechanic. It didn't matter who you were. No one was better than anybody else. We had our leaders, but I remember Mr. Malisham. He ran a garage shop, and we had meetings there.
People began to protest. Mr. Joe Malisham, he was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first civil rights leaders that I can remember. He wanted to make sure everybody was represented equally. And from there, they came up with the Tuscaloosa Citizens for Action Committee. It was abbreviated TCAC. And Mr. Malisham was part of it, and other business people in the community. Sometimes there was secret meetings held at Reverend Linton's barbershop. So on June 9th, I lied to my mother. I sneaked out the house because my mother, the superintendent at that time was Dr. Nelson. and he found out that I was protesting. So when he found out about that, he called my mother in and he threatened her with a job. So she told me not to go.
If I may, let me just take a moment to remind you of some of the things that we talked about last year on our virtual reunion. If you'll remember, we took a little time travel trip back to the 1970s. We started, and I know those of you sitting in the back cannot see this, but we started with this. This is a screenshot of the Tuscaloosa News from January 1st, 1970. This huge 72-point font headline just fairly screams at us. Freedom of choice to end here. Sounds so ominous, doesn't it? Sounds scary. Almost sounds un-American for freedom of choice to end. The problem that existed was that Tuscaloosa's leaders had no intention of implementing or executing that plan as written. I had the occasion recently to sit down with a number of friends who graduated from Tuscaloosa High School in 1971. We had a great conversation. It was very candid. Many of those people lived in my neighborhood. We talked about that. And they were willing to share their strategies, schemes, to circumvent the plan. Some of them were adopted by relatives across town. Some of them had fake adoption papers drawn up. More commonly, my friends said, their parents would rent an apartment across town that was on the other side of the line, and whether they ever went there or whether they ever stayed there, they had that address they could fall back on. I see some heads nodding. You spoke, you know, you were there. Some of the boldest ones just put down a false address in hopes that it would not be verified. And it wasn't. So on September the 8th, 1970, my sister Mary and I walked through the doors of Druid High School, and we became Druid Dragons.
Ain't gonna let Bull Connor turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let Bull Connor turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let George Wallace turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let George Wallace turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up to freedom's land.